Hello and welcome to part 2 of my gargantuan Final Fantasy VII series. Couple of things before we begin. Firstly, if you haven't watched part 1 of this series, what are you doing here? Go watch that first. It's right here. Okay, for those of you who are still here, let's do a quick recap. Not so long ago, I played one of my beloved childhood titles, namely FF7 for the PS1. For the 4th time in my life. As I did so, I kept notes in this trusty notebook of anything that came to mind. And I mean anything. In part 1, we covered the first 7 sessions of what amounted to a 20-session playthrough, which leaves us at Cosmo Canyon. So, not to toot my own horn or anything, but I don't know that anyone else is doing this kind of video on YouTube. It's not a retrospective, nor is it a let's play, a highlights package, or a video essay. I'm not really sure what to call it, but I feel like I need a name for this form of content because I think I might have invented it. Let me know in the comments if you can come up with a catchy name for this kind of thing. Much appreciated. Finally, thank you for joining me on this journey. You know, it's been such a joy to return to this title and to share my dumb thoughts with a sophisticated audience such as yourselves. So, without further ado, let's get back into it, starting with Session 8, Cosmo Canyon. And now, another absolute banger in the Cosmo Canyon theme song. The Turtle's Paradise poster in the bar here reminds me once more of the sheer enormity of mystery and secrets in FF7. This leads me to another rumination. In the days prior to one-click answers, and this extends beyond gaming, there was joy to be found in the experience of not knowing. The simple act of wondering, of guessing, acted as an ether to the imagination. And for this reason, I am grateful to have grown up when I did. Bugenhagen doesn't have legs and hovers above the ground. This made perfect sense then, as it does now. I don't need to know why, he just does. It's Bugenhagen. Cosmo Canyon is where the greater threat to the planet is established. The way in which this is intertwined with Nanaki's episode makes it one of the more significant locations in FF7. I felt so invested in the characters at this point, even in my 4th playthrough as a grown-ass man, that, after not bringing Aerith with Cloud to the planetarium, felt so guilty that I actually reloaded so as to bring her along. This act is the single most embarrassing thing I've ever divulged publicly. You're welcome. Bugenhagen's basics of planetary studies sound like the kind of stuff your born-again yoga instructor would spout after 2 spliffs in a Byron Bay treehouse. The only difference is that when Bugenhagen speaks, I listen. Cosmo Canyon also features a great FF7 pastime, that being the group meeting. I adored these parts of the game, being able to wander from character to character and see what was on their mind. The highlight of this one has to be Tifa doubting the legitimacy of Cloud's identity in a typically refrained manner. On an entirely different note, it was at this point that I realized Tifa is Lara Croft. Nanaki's, or is it Nanakai's? We'll go with Nanakai. No, I'm going to go with Nanaki. Nanaki's relationship with his father is something that struck a deep chord personally for reasons I'm sure you can deduce. At times it felt as if the game was speaking directly at me. Thus, during the scene in which the revelation regarding Seto is shared with our quadrupedal friend, I made like Seto himself and cried For those keeping count, that's twice so far, the first being during the backstory of Aerith's mother in Midgar. This scene with Nanaki and Bugenhagen so blatantly wants to draw emotion from you, a fact which does little to reduce its effect. I do wish Red 13 had more to do after this point, as he barely receives any focus from here on out. He does, however, get this memorable moment in the spotlight. I'm going to pause a moment here, this being the point in the game's narrative right before things start to get weird. I'd like to say that even if the game were to fall off a cliff at this point, it would still likely be one of my all-time favorites. The first 15 hours are simply that good. The crazy part is that, in a sense, it does fall off a cliff. Scrap that, it jumps off a cliff, and somehow manages to stick the landing. Anyhow, let's continue. Nibelheim. Nibelheim is gigantic. What Corel does for Barrett and Cosmo Canyon for Red 13, Nibelheim does, not only for Cloud, but also Tifa, Sephiroth, and to an extent, Vincent. It serves as a centerpiece for the struggle connecting our major characters, that of confronting the past. It also explores how a fickle memory can misinterpret, misconstrue, and flat out mislead in ways that shape a person's present and future. I recently watched Neon Genesis Evangelion for the first time and couldn't help but see parallels, particularly when it comes to the protagonist of either narrative. Nibelheim, then, is the setting for the game's most psychologically fascinating sections, and also its biggest rug pulls. In Cloud's house, one need only look at the menu to observe the truth. Or is the game lying to me? This Fabio-looking guy who falls off the rope and pathetically attempts to get back on it is such a quintessential Sephiroth area enemy, don't you think? We receive a little hint of what is to come here with the line about a calamity from the skies. Come to think of it, the PAL box art gives us another, more blatant hint. The bridge in Mount Nibel is ludicrously steep. Now, I don't have a fear of heights per se. I do, however, dread rope bridges. I cannot believe anyone in their right mind would want to cross one. Surely this is a rational fear, though. Let me know in the comments. I've always loved bio spells in Final Fantasy games. There's a kind of sensory pleasure I get from casting it, from hearing the noise as those poisonous goo bubbles engulf my target. I also enjoy saying it. Bio. Feels good to say. Now that I think of it, a lot of the magic in this game has that monosyllabic purity to it. Ice. Cure. Bolt. Fire. Life. Death. Look, I'm a simple man. As I traverse Mount Nibel's spiky peaks, my mind returns to the whole "we don't know what you're talking about. You shouldn't lie" routine delivered by the stand-in residents of Nibelheim. I'm a little surprised in reflection that this doesn't have a greater effect on Cloud and Tifa. If some shit like that were to go down in my life, I'd need a serious sit down with someone to figure things out. I'm guessing it was a pacing choice. Rocket Town's inn, bearing the name Shanghai Inn, seems like something I should refrain from giving further thought to, lest I open a can of multiverse worms. So, let's focus instead on the little details of the inn. For example, the fact that someone answers when you knock on the toilet door, which give it and the world of Final Fantasy VII such life. Here we have our first Shinra-centric plot points in a while. The symbolism of this forgotten Shinra rocket towering over an otherwise irrelevant town is a clear and effective message, similar to those seen in Junon and Midgar. Shinra just love building bigger shit than anyone else. In another first, Cid Highwind was my first Cid. He remains my favourite, though there are certainly other good ones. I had no idea at the time that the series had recurring elements such as Cids, Chocobos, Mogs, Crystals, and so on. He comes off as a bit of a dick at first, because, well, he is a dick. I love how even Barrett questions his attitude. Naturally, Cid's backstory explains the giant stick up his ass due to failed dreams and that goddamn idiot Shera. I worry that the remake will attempt to soften some of his uglier lines regarding Shera, as this would do a disservice to players. The beauty of Cid's failed rocket launch lies in how the seemingly obnoxious captain's actions reveal another side to his character. As important as Cid's dream of going to space may have been to him, he is incapable of sacrificing Shera to achieve this, even at her request. Contrast that with Avalanche, who had no qualms about destroying the lives of countless people to achieve their aims. The ugly side of Cid is all talk. In reality, he is less capable of evil than the majority of the party. Of course, this differs from my take as a 12-year-old boy. I thought he was cool because he smoked a cigarette while fighting and used bad words. Here's something I never noticed though. Is that a pack of Marlboro Lights tucked into his goggles? Tea. With lard. Please tell me this is merely an in-joke and not a real means of consuming the beverage. I find it curious that in this world with Mako reactors, a cyberpunk megacity, and a giant, golden, mushroom-shaped Las Vegas, the primary means of transport are scant. The president of Shinra needs to borrow an airplane from Cid. Look, I get it from a gameplay standpoint, of course. Final thought from this session. Palmer getting hit by a truck has to be the game's best death. This weed monster has an attack called Spaz Voice, which makes your team furious. Best game ever. Have I by any chance mentioned the music? Rude is such a lad. The Turks' Wutai subplot gives the best insight into what these guys are really about. Refusing to fight because they are on vacation finishes the job their earlier conversation in Gongaga started. I now fully buy their status as employees rather than antagonists. Reno drops a dime of wisdom here also. Remember, dear viewer, a pro isn't a person who sacrifices himself for the job. That's just a fool. And here we find another mistake. These guys are creepy. This sentence is structurally almost identical to "this guy are sick," yet manages to make a different error. Back to Rude being a mad lad. In case you forgot, he straight up wastes Don Corneo with a throwing knife. Cat house! As we return to the gold saucer with all our materia back in hand, cheers Yuffie, my thoughts turn to Dio. For all the man's wealth and material power, clearly his greatest perk is the ability to confidently strut about his workplace in jocks. Maybe he hires the same tailor as that dude from the Hans Christian Andersen tale. Another juicy group meeting takes place in the spooky hotel. I now realize an additional benefit to these scenes. They serve to catch up anyone who hasn't played in over a month and has forgotten what the hell is going on. I'm sure we've all experienced that, though if that happened to you during your first run of FF7, something might be wrong with you. Perhaps you hadn't picked up on it thus far, but this was always going to be my date. While all for a bit of Aerith, your narrator is ride or die for Tifa. Tifa is the baddest. Tifa is... You know what? Let's not get into it. During the theatre scene portion of the date, I am suddenly reminded of the Laguna film sequence towards the end of Final Fantasy VIII, the one with the fake dragon. This is something I've considered before. In many regards, Final Fantasy VIII feels like a dialogue with its more widely beloved predecessor. That's a conversation for another time though. Back to the date. Cloud's wooden pre-meltdown persona is fantastic here. He's such a lousy date. God bless Tifa for accepting him regardless. It's worth noting that the Gold Saucer, this place of escapism and gaming within an escapist game, is the location where we both meet Cait Sith, get betrayed by him, and learn the most about his character. Of all the cast, Cait Sith is the one I feel I've gained the most understanding of in this fourth playthrough. If you haven't guessed what I'm getting at with him, I promise I'll explain later. I have suffered such painful decision paralysis when it comes to picking a team. Another embarrassing thing to admit, but I feel the members of your party, even in the less plot-heavy sections, shape the subtext of the journey, even if only in your imagination. The overworld theme is still banging. Tseng isn't the worst guy, all things considered. Actually, wait, wasn't it him who slapped Aerith around in the helicopter way back in Midgar? And he's supposed to have known her since they were kids. Now I don't know what to think. Temple of the Ancients is a proper plot-level dungeon, only the second of this length thus far. It's reminiscent of an MC Escher picture. I'd later become a big fan of the Dutch artist and had the chance to see his work in person when it came to the National Gallery of Victoria. I loved it so much after going with a friend that I went again with my mother the following week. This is the only exhibition I've been to twice. The influence of this game on me, outside of gaming even, resonates to this day. Returning to my earlier remark about party members shaping the experience of the game, Red 13 likes the smell of the temple. The things you learn. As fantastic as the game world is, mysteries still exist. The ancients colour the game with a sense of the unknown, of secrets buried deep. For a large portion of FF7's runtime, it is itself a mystery. Not a whodunit, more a what the hell happened. Doesn't exactly have the same ring, but you get my point. Tsung getting wrecked by Sephiroth after inviting Eleanor to dinner is a mini tragedy, a little morsel of sadness, prominent enough to appreciate without drawing full-on Seto tears. On Sephiroth, the guy brings the god energy rather hard here. Our de facto antagonist is positioned as legitimately unstoppable in a way 12-year-old me couldn't help but find awesome. I never hated or even disliked Sephiroth. While we're on the topic of our Masamune-wielding Silver Fox, has anyone noticed how his hair is similar to Aerith's? Even if this is purely due to changes in development post-character design, the similarity of their appearance works in the narrative. Sephiroth and Aerith represent two long-forgotten entities in Genova and the Ancients. Side note, while typing these thoughts into slightly more coherent sentences, I did a little research, and yes, they were originally designed to be brother and sister, and then apparently former lovers. I'd forgotten how unhinged Sephiroth really is. Perhaps I initially mistook his lunatic proclamations as cool bad guy stuff. This guy has truly lost it though. His repetition of the phrase, "I am becoming one with the planet," is on a straitjacket level. Seeing a relatively normal him prior to the revelations at the Mount Nibble reactor gives these statements more substance. Speaking of lunacy, there have been plenty of hints up till now that our spiky-ass leading man may also have a few frayed wires. Those hints become a reality in the temple. Cloud's unnerving episode, cackling over Sephiroth's plan to summon Meteor, takes the mindfuckery to another level. It may not seem that big a deal, but this marked another first in my experience of narratives. Here we have a sword-wielding, handsome front man with some serious issues. The rug had been pulled on innocent gamer me so many times now that I hadn't the faculty to formulate theories as to what was happening next. All I knew was Cloud had lost it, and I had no idea what would come next. Aerith keeping Cloud in the dark about this psychotic episode puzzles me a little. One would think she'd want to inform him of his descent into madness to prevent it from becoming worse. Perhaps she knew what was up from the get-go. Either way, Red isn't impressed. Jesus Christ, the wall monster. This guy became an actual wall for me in my first playthrough. I thought I was stuck in this joint for good. FF7 is not an inherently hard game, but it has its moments. I am not ashamed to admit that this son of a bitch handed me my first game over of the run. I got it on the second attempt. If memory serves right, which, as we know from this game, it often doesn't, this fucker wiped my party out dozens of times as a youngster. Kate Sith's matchmaking bit is setting us up as players for what is to come, as is his psych-out death scene. The latter serves to reassure us that it can't really happen. Also, Reeve is role-playing this character so hard. I'd love to see a scene of him at a computer somewhere in the Shinra offices, putting on a voice in full-on D&D mode. You can't control Cloud as he hands Sephiroth the black materia. Cloud can't control Cloud. You are not Cloud. Cloud is not Cloud. There is no spoon. Cloud then wails on Aerith. This is the last real interaction they have which is messed up. Kate Sith respawns at a harrowingly bad time, leading to what must be the most outrageous of all tonal contrasts throughout the game. There's a whole lot going on in this scene, centered around characters being controlled remotely, not having agency over their actions. At the risk of getting into sickeningly pretentious meta territory, I will point out that the player themselves is holding a controller, though they too have no control. And with that, we begin what is the most interesting section of the game, in my opinion. It has been a wild ride thus far, but it only goes deeper. What is up with the Gigas Armlet materia slots? The treasure dig has to be one of the dumbest minigames. I didn't even like it as a kid. Conversely, City of the Ancients might be my favourite location in the entire game. I'm not sure if that's a weird take, as I've not consumed FF7 content during the playthrough and writing of this piece, so as to avoid having my ever malleable opinion influenced by others. City of the Ancients gives a truly alien vibe. It's almost like a dried up Atlantis. The notion of a forgotten capital from a civilization lost to the throes of time lends gravity and believability to the game world and the temporal nature of all upon it. Life ended for the ancients, so why couldn't it for the current inhabitants of the planet? You also get a sense that some sizable shit is about to go down. FF7 has a way of seamlessly expressing the significance of place through its visuals and music. Speaking of which, have I mentioned the music? There is such loneliness to the forgotten capital. It's hard to explain, but I feel legitimate sadness in the abandoned seashell residences. They feel so homey, so recently lived in. This place is a graveyard, yet there are echoes of the simple lives that were led there eons ago. The transition from day to night as the party leave their lonely seashell lodgings in search of Aerith, going off a feeling that Cloud has in his soul, slathers this section of the game in awe, pathos, and foreboding. Receiving comet materia at this point is some neat foreshadowing too. Now that I've sufficiently showered this location with praise, and believe me, I held back, let's move on to the more widely praised or mourned scene, the one which was spoiled for me that hot summer's day in Geraldton decades ago. We get a serious dose of Cloud mindfuckery prior to the worst kept secret in gaming. The loss of control here from the player's perspective is really effective. I love how you were given a kind of faux control over Cloud, enough to have him wriggle uncomfortably and raise his sword murderously. This is a little fourth wall breaking if we consider that Sephiroth is the one manipulating Cloud. In doing so, he forces the player to press the buttons, beating them at the game. For me, the real tragedy of Aerith's story isn't her death. Rather, it is her whole life, her loneliness and abandonment, having to hide, having to be different. This is obviously the major attraction when it comes to tear-jerking scenes in FF7. I will say they welled up for me, but I didn't go full Seto this time round, partially due to steeling myself for it in the Temple of the Ancients. On an entirely different note, Sephiroth straight up calls Cloud an NPC here. Also, Aerith sinks when she dies. I don't think Barrett has been in my party at this point of the game before. Our gun-armed friend's response to Cloud delivering his most honest lines of the first disc, bearing his heart to his friends, is so cold, it actually made me laugh out loud. I don't know, man. Ah, yes. The feeling of first seeing the "Please insert disc 2" screen. A mixture of accomplishment, sadness at what had just transpired, and a holy shit realization that after the enormity of everything that had already happened, we're only now getting to the second of 3 discs. Realistically, this is kind of the halfway point of the game if you discount the cavalcade of optional stuff on disc 3. First time through, however, unaware of this, a feeling similar to that of leaving Midgar and seeing the world map for the first time transpires. One of the things that excites me most about fantasy as a genre is the tension between the mystery of what is to come and the promise that whatever it is will be epic. This is how I felt at the end of the first season of Game of Thrones, and I'm sure others, particularly those who hadn't read the books, felt the same. A familiar thought reverberated through my consciousness earlier this morning. Final Fantasy VII wants you to feel, more so than any form of media I'd experienced prior to my initial playthrough. The only titles which have come close to having the same emotional impact on me are a couple of the other Final Fantasy games, along with The Last of Us. Make no mistake, there are other titles I hold in similar regard to Square's PS1 blockbuster. Dark Souls, Resident Evil 2, Morrowind, Super Mario World. I adore these games. However, they don't have the same emotional resonance. On another note, here's a squirrel enemy that casts level 4 suicide and shrinks you. This game rules. The whole materia aspect has the knock-on effect of making caves more interesting. I mentioned earlier that I've grown to really enjoy a Pokemon experience. However, there is nothing worse than a boring cave riddled with bland textures and Zubats. Although caves are a quintessential locale in RPGs, they are usually presented as dull and depressing between spaces. Conversely, the caves in FF7 are vivid, luminescent subterranean spaces due to the crystalline materia present throughout. I never felt in a rush to emerge from caves in this game, which is an achievement in itself. The PS1 era Final Fantasy games were the last to feature world maps. Let me say on the record that while I understand the decision to move on from what may have seemed antiquated, I miss the world map in FF games. This could just be a personal thing, as I've always loved maps. They impart the understanding that this is indeed a world. For the whole planet to be in peril, what exactly is at stake makes concrete sense to us as players, for by the end of the game we are intimately familiar with that world, compact as it may be. The Cetra lore is fascinating. Genova was a literal crisis from the sky who fucked over the ancients by deceiving them, giving them a virus. Said virus made them mad, turning them into monsters. Interesting that Sephiroth, Genova's pseudo-offspring, goes on to call another calamity from the sky. I'm going back and forth over who I consider to be the real villain of FF7. At times it feels like Hojo is the real bad guy, at least what he represents, namely science without humanity. Then again, this is all about Genova. Not that it matters, nor that a story requires a singular villain, but I feel as if those two are of a purer evil than our Silver Fox. Then again, maybe it's simply because he's better looking that I empathize. We get some much needed Aerith backstory at the Icicle Inn shortly after her death. The game wants our sadness to linger a while, to keep things personal. Aerith's life was tragic from the jump, and this Ghast and Ifalna story is heartbreaking. Fucking Hojo. Earlier, I promised to reveal where I would choose to live were I an NPC in Final Fantasy VII. Here it is then. For me, Icicle Inn has to be the choice. I've always been a winter guy. The homes are cozy, and what's more, it's kind of separate from the global pandemonium occurring throughout the game. You can go snowboarding. There's a good bar. It would be a prime spot for catching up on the gaming backlog by the fireplace. You'd also have the opportunity to meet travelers who come for winter sports. Clearly, I've given this too much thought, so let's move on. Looking at my notes in this section, I can see that I wrote here, and I quote, "Snowboarding, kind of good." I must share with you now that this sentiment did not last after my attempts to grind out GP at the Gold Saucer. Snowboarding caused me more rage than anything else in this game. Then I started chocobo racing and forgot all about it. I have a bold declaration to make. Bats are the single worst enemy in existence. Honestly, can you remember a time in a JRPG, or better yet, any game, when you were happy to encounter these assholes? I've always salivated over visualizations of new weapons in combat. This works for some characters more than others, as it's hard to distinguish Tifa's gloves or Red's headdress. The snowy run from Icicle Inn to the Northern Crater is pretty immense. If the game weren't on 3 discs, one would be forgiven for expecting this to be a lead-up to the final boss. Ah, yeah, the Schizoid Dragon. I recall getting pummeled by this guy on my first run. It's cool to observe how, after playing dozens of other JRPGs, one is able to calmly deal with most of what FF7 has to offer, at least in the main game. I mentioned my love for Dark Souls. While I certainly enjoy a challenge, I'm glad this isn't such a slog. The overworld theme has shifted to a bleaker vibe. Gone are the occasional tones of optimism we heard in the original. As we close in on the northern crater, I take a moment to appreciate the fact that there are 3 or even 4 different enemy groups, each seeking their own ends and often working at cross purposes. The Shinra are doing their whole Promised Land, Mako energy, greed shtick, while Sephiroth, or Genova, wants more calamity from the sky in order to ascend to godhood and reclaim the planet. Hojo, meanwhile, is supporting Sephiroth from the shadows for reasons that seem more about scientific curiosity than anything else, and the Turks are merely trying to earn a paycheck, upholding the values of their organization in the process. These reunion cultists are an odd bunch. Why are some dying en route to their messiah? How similar are these guys to Red and, spoiler, Cloud? Side note, if Cloud is being summoned by Sephiroth, is Red? I would have loved to get more info regarding the effects of Genova therapy on our quadrupedal companion. Why is Sephiroth killing his guys? I guess this is to merge their Genova energy? Is that what's going on? Or is Sephiroth just being a lunatic? Okay, I've been holding back from putting this thought out there for some reason, but here goes. Is this Sephiroth? I'm aware that his actual body is elsewhere, but who's running the show here? This question might be more important to the story than we think. If this is Genova using the image of Seph as a host, what of the actual Sephiroth? Is it possible that Sephiroth is a Genova puppet the whole time, in the same way that Cloud is a Sephiroth puppet? Good lord, my head is spinning. The reveal of Cloud as a failed Sephiroth clone is another monumental narrative rug pull. I love this line. I never lived up to being Cloud. Additionally, it becomes glaringly clear here that the Shinra are way out of their depth. As the dust settles from this overwhelming mid-game crescendo, we are faced with a cataclysm from the heavens. Giant kaiju acting as white blood cells for the planet. An utterly compromised protagonist, and Tifa as our new leader. The good guys have taken some serious L's in this reshuffling of the board, but look on the bright side. We now get to play as Tifa. Story time with Porto. During my second playthrough of this game, as I mentioned at the top of the first part of this video, I was living in a share house with 2 other guys. One of these was a longtime friend of mine who'd made the journey with me across Australia from Perth to Melbourne in search of fresh adventures on the more populated side of the country. The other was a random flatmate we'd fallen into living with who, for the sake of anonymity, I will call Gavin. Gavin's primary vocation was music, specifically rap. For countless hours we'd hear him practicing or recording the same song lyrics, the content of which mainly concerned a woman with whom a romance had recently ended. Poorly. I, like many, could empathize with Gavin, but let me tell you, this guy was relentless with the rapping. Now, I'm well into rap and am all for people pursuing their dreams, so put up with hearing the same stuff over and again in the spirit of creativity and free expression. I was kicking back on the sofa after a long night of shelf stacking at Target Chinatown. All I could think about during work was getting back into the world of FF7. I'd recently ordered a used copy of the PlayStation Platinum Edition on eBay for 50 Australian dollars, which was a lot for me at the time. Actually, it still kind of is. I'd arrived home at midnight and quickly made tea, not wanting to waste a second. I had 0 classes the following day and wasn't required at work until 8 p.m, so could conceivably stay up until 4 or even 5 a.m. playing the ever-loving hell out of this beloved title from my childhood. I fired up my PS2 Slim, reveling in the soothing beep of the cursor as I chose a save file from the day prior, and emerged in the Sector 8 slums a few hours into my adventure. Here it was then, my ultimate escape, a world into which I could be absorbed, losing track of external time or space, losing myself. My eyes twitched involuntarily on hearing a door open down the hall. I didn't want to engage with anyone at that moment. They were welcome to join me on the sofa if they wanted to be consumed in this journey alongside me, but under no circumstances would I humour them with discussions not pertaining to my adventure on the screen. I'd waited for this moment. Out came Gavin, intrigued by the admittedly banging music emanating from our television speakers. Have I mentioned the music of FF7? We shared a hello and, to my surprise, he did not take a seat next to me. Instead, he edged closer to the television itself, nodding his head to the beat. Before I'd finished shopping at the item store, Gavin, standing next to the television like one half of a duo on stage, began freestyle rapping to the music, looking upon me, awaiting praise. At first, I admit I got a kick out of it. It was nice that he appreciated the music. After all, it's really good. Then a minute passed. Then 2. 3. Anger bubbled from my belly, rising to the chest, morphing into something closer to fury as the 4th minute arrived. I could no longer concentrate on my adventure. The 5th minute came, us now staring at one another, me visualizing what I might do to this man if another 5 were to transpire in this manner. 6. 7. Final Fantasy VII. I had to stop this lunatic, hell-bent on co-opting my escape into his own ego fantasy. I took a deep breath and closed my eyes as the 8th minute of improvised bars drew near. Opening them as if from a coma, I rose my hand to interject, declaring, "Thank you. You can stop now." He muttered something awkwardly before shambling off to his room. In hindsight, I may have been able to throw a spanner in his works by moving to an area of Midgar with random encounters. Even then, it may not have deterred him. It might seem cruel, but there's a lesson to be learned here. When an experience is important to someone, don't get in the way. Don't make it about yourself. Honestly though, if you're out there, Gavin, I truly hope the music and life in general are going well. Also, play Final Fantasy VII. Back to the game. Scarlet's hatred for Tifa is hilarious. It's a little shoehorned in, but does give us the slap fight. By the way, I somehow managed to lose the slap fight this time round. For 2 decades, I didn't even know you could. Sorry, Tifa. To be fair, I'd probably hate Tifa too, were I a straight woman in that world. I mean, god damn. I really appreciate the cinematic nature and simultaneous moving parts in the weapon attack sequence at Junon. We've got Tifa, Barrett, Kate Sith, Yuffie, Rufus, Heidegger, and Weapon itself. Speaking of the weapons, they appealed to me immensely as a young'un, drawing those Power Rangers vibes from my memory. The Highwind. The freedom afforded by this final vehicle is a game changer. Also, Sid roasts the shit out of Cloud now that he's gone. Oh man, I wanted so badly to be able to snowboard as Tifa. This combination of elements suddenly present in the game, from a new leader to the looming meteor in the sky, the foreboding music, and the freedom of the Highwind, make it feel like a completely new experience. Chaos Chocobo. My aforementioned lack of disbelief to suspend at the age of 12 led me to think Cloud was cooked at this stage of the game. To be fair, after Aerith's death, one could be forgiven for thinking it possible to lose our spiky-headed jerk of a protagonist. Seriously though, Tifa is the baddest. She's all in on Cloud, even as a vegetable. As sad as it may be losing Tifa on top of everything, it only makes me love her more. Party members are dropping like flies. This provides a great opportunity to use others, however, particularly for those who chose Cloud, Tifa, and Aerith once they left Midgar. Barrett coming through with the sick burn on Kate Sith. What, that you a spy? The Shinra answer to all problems seems to be throw materia at it. Failing that, throw huge materia at it. They come off as bumbling by this stage of the game, the player never trusting that their solutions will truly work out. Hey guys, welcome to the epilogue of part 2 of this video series. This is post-editing Porto with a couple of things I wanted to add before we say goodbye. Firstly, thanks again for watching. I really appreciate you guys joining me. I really mean that. I hope you've found something stimulating about this, or just relaxing about this video, or enjoyable for whatever reason you might have. And naturally, I'm obliged to ask you to press all the buttons that the algorithm loves: the likes, the subscribes, the bells, the nebulous hype buttons that I don't truly understand, but I'm sure helps in some algorithmic way. And also, throughout the video, there were a bunch of questions I asked, maybe to myself rhetorically or to you guys, and I'd love to hear what you have to say about really anything in the video. Moving on, in this video, specifically in the story I had about Gavin, I used the dreaded AI art to create those sketches. I did have someone who I was going to ask to help me with that, but schedules and timing and everything kind of didn't align, and I really needed these things done within a certain time frame. I've got a busy life, as many of us do, and I wanted to get this video up at some stage. And so yeah, I went to AI art. It might have been kind of obvious to some of you. There were some pretty glaring inconsistencies throughout that portion, visually at least, but I don't know, I kind of like the inconsistencies. I think there's something almost human about that, even if it's a very non-human creator of that visual art. You know, I don't know where people stand on me doing that. I know that AI is kind of a dirty word, although a lot of people use it for a lot of things, and that's probably the reason it is a dirty word. And, you know, I agree too. Over the last year or so, I've started seeing or tuning into YouTube videos, and you can kind of tell when they've been sort of written by AI. There's this formulaic nature to sort of list videos and whatnot that AI seems to be able to just pump out. And, you know, not that I'm having a go at any particular channels or anything like that, but it's just something I've noticed, and I find that distasteful. But I do believe AI is a useful tool if used responsibly, and I think where I stand on it is that I wouldn't ever want AI to do the thing that is the focal point of the endeavor itself. I think for me, using AI is fine in this kind of supplemental way, where it you know, can complement areas of the channel or the creation or the whatever it is. And so, yeah, for me, look, I'd never use AI to write my scripts because it wouldn't feel like me talking. But, you know, from time to time, I may employ similar techniques, and I hope people are okay with that. But I'd love to know what people think. Is it a hot topic, or is it cooled off? I feel like it's still kind of a hot topic. So yeah, just admitting that I used a little AI in that portion, if you didn't already know that. At the start of this video, I somewhat jokingly bragged about maybe inventing this format of video. And, you know, I've definitely taken inspiration from lots of creators. Tim Rogers, Never Knows Best, two great channels. You know, even some of that kind of nostalgia stuff from channels like the Happy Console Gamer, you know, a lot of the good ones that you already know. I definitely, you know, consume, or I don't like using that word, consume. I watch and tune into a lot of their stuff, but I don't think this specific format is something that's been done exactly. I don't know, or maybe it has been, but I felt like I came up with it on my own. If I've copied it, I've copied it cosmically without knowing it. Like, I do want a name for it though. Like, what would you call it? What would you call this kind of video? Like, I in the first part, and probably in this part, I'll label it as a deep dive, but I don't know. I'd love something more specific. Help me out here, guys. Couple more things. You know, as I said in the first part of the video, and the epilogue of the first part, I'm a one-man show, and I do put a lot of effort into these videos, but this is not my job. I'm still working full-time, doing a lot of stuff. I've been traveling a bunch. I went to Vietnam with my partner to meet some family. Time is a limited resource for me, and so the next video is probably going to take another 3 to 4 months. That's what I said the first time, and I think this took about 4 months since then. So hopefully that's when the next one will drop. Yeah, I mean, I'm loving making this, so it's definitely something I'll continue doing. But yeah, just be patient, And if you're looking at my other content on the channel, yeah, it's different. I think these couple of videos are the ones that I've really tried to put a lot of effort into, the ones that I feel really invested in, and so it might not match your expectations if you like this stuff, but do know that I've got plans, I've got stuff I'm working on, and I want to continue making videos of this quality. I think that's it, guys. As much as I'd love to sit here and just shoot the shit for another half hour, I should probably spare your eardrums. Thanks again for watching. Do share it with other people if you think they'd enjoy this. Point this in their direction. I do want this to do well. I think this is something I'm quite proud of, though it's not perfect, of course. There's still always issues technically, and maybe even in terms of coherence, I'm not sure. But yeah, do share it with people if you think they'd like it. I I think that's all I've got to say, guys. Love you all for watching. Be good, happy gaming, and we'll see you in the next video. Bye-bye.